because there's multiple things they cannot explain, such as gravity, space-time, energy, time, consciousness. Consciousness is a big one. So it's like, okay, so they're coming to the realization we're never going to be able to explain these things that I just mentioned, which are huge concepts, using the model. So you know how we went from a paradigm shift from Newtonian physics to quantum physics? So it's like we're getting to the point where there's going to be the necessity of another paradigm shift to a new kind of physics that can explain these things, because now we have to go up into what's called asymptotics. The idea we ascend to a certain altitude where we see all these things, try to put them together. So that's very interesting, because, and I'll just whet your appetite a little bit, because for me, when the Bible says in Hebrews 1:3 that Jesus himself is holding the universe together, moment by moment. So if you have that idea, and then you have this other idea that, or this miracle recorded in the Old Testament with Joshua, the day the earth stood still, right? This has been used as evidence against Scripture. Like, how could this ever happen with our current understanding of physics? So, Christians at some point in time have responded by saying, we can prove that the earth stood still, the sun stood still for Joshua so he could complete that battle against his enemy that day, because there's a missing day. And they try to claim, I think, that NASA found this missing day. Well, that's complete nonsense, maybe. Maybe that's a harsh word. But the idea, if God is creating the reality moment by moment, I say reality, it's reality for us, that we exist in, could he, and he does this, say, through the language of mathematics, could he not project a different projection for a moment using a different set of mathematics? I'm getting far afield. There's this Gödel's theorem, something that, Gödel's incompleteness theorem says there is an infinite number of possibilities with reference to mathematics. You'll never be able to explore all the different possibilities to explain, say, reality with mathematics. And if that's the case, then imagine that theory kind of lines up with this idea that God, if he's projecting the projection that we experience as consciousness and reality, could he not simply, he wouldn't have to change the laws of physics, he simply changes the underlying math whereby the sun appears to stand still. I gotta stop, because that's getting sounding really crazy.
Is your mic on?
Is my mic on? I hope so.
I don't think so.
Wow. Got too excited. Thank you, David. Got to give me a big thumbs up. So we're going to switch gears now. Maybe I left it off on purpose. So space-time is doomed. Check it out. Space-time is doomed. Very interesting idea with reference to our apologetics and where physicists are coming to and hitting a brick wall with the reductionist model, not being able to explain some major concepts that we experience in our life: gravity, energy, consciousness, time, space-time. Okay, so I want to do another follow-up to what we've been talking about. We've been talking about this idea that shame is so pervasive. I got to do one more message on this. Shame is so pervasive. There's only two types of people in the world. There's broken people who know it and broken people who don't know it. I know it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I really want us to download this on our permanent hard drives. And the idea is we carry this around with us, and it causes us to isolate. And if you think about who God is, God made himself extremely vulnerable, did he not? God made himself vulnerable when knowing he was going to create Adam and Eve, that ultimately they were going to reject his command. God made himself vulnerable on the cross, extremely vulnerable. But we in isolation, we hide these things because we feel like if we share them, they will be rejected, and so we lock them up in a closet. And that's the part where we say, well, if you really know me, you'd reject me. And then we see that communication and relationships break down. Now, Jesus is calling us to be a part of restoration, bringing people together. But it is really hard to bring, say, two people together who are both experiencing shame, because they have a tendency to lash out at each other, take it out on each other. So what happens is, if you get in a situation where you feel like no one can understand you, no one really gets you, and there's a whole bunch of the things that you have in your soul that you can't share with people, what ends up happening is emotional leakage, because emotional leakage can happen, or misplaced aggression can happen, or what else can happen? You become numb. You become numb. Now, this idea, here's where part of what I want to talk about today is the idea of unburdening your soul through prayer. Unburdening your soul through prayer. Some of us think that prayer has to be like, oh God, you are so holy. Thank you so much. Thank you for the day. Thank you for the weather. And meanwhile, your soul is so burdened down with like the darkness, because how can it not be burdened down with darkness when we're born into a broken world? All of us are going to experience horrific things, let's say. Edwin, you missed it. You got to check out a lecture called Space-Time is Doomed. We'll talk about it after. You'll love it. Now, I can't get into everything we've covered the last 4 or 5 weeks, not to mention the 4 Wednesdays. But one of the concepts we're going to need to import for today's purposes is the idea that we define love this way. To be loved is to be seen, known, and understood. All the parts of you. Now, to be truly seen, known, and understood, you have to be, it requires that you're vulnerable to another person. Part of what I want to get to round 2, huh? Good dad right there, taking care of the child. That's awesome. Where was I at? Yes, because we're made in God's image. God exists in community. God exists in Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Because we're made in that image, it's important that is why in the very fabric of our design, we of necessity need to be completely vulnerable with someone. And if you're not and you shut yourself off into isolation, you end up carrying this burden that will leak out into your life, into your family's life, into those around you. Now, Jesus coming to earth, he didn't have any problems, right? Like, Jesus he was called a man of sorrows. He experienced a lot of deep anguish on a lot of different levels in a lot of different arenas. For instance, if you read the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is preaching, performing miracles, and he's in this house. You know what happens? Families have a tendency to hold us down, right? And if you're trying to grow, it's like, oh no, you're trying to grow. That's not who you are. I know who you are. You're the person that failed all these times. Sometimes family keeps the best records of all our failures, right? Like, it's set in stone. We keep track of their failures and they keep track of ours. And if they try to grow, we don't necessarily like that, because that's a reflection of the fact that we're not growing. So we want to hold them back in order to justify the fact that we're not moving forward either, or vice versa, whatever it might be. Now, if Jesus in Mark, early on in Mark, his mom and brothers, his family members come, and guess what they essentially say? Jesus, you're crazy. Like, they didn't even believe in him. That's part of the experience that God himself had taking on flesh. Now, you want proof of a broken world that we're born in? God comes to earth, takes on the form of, has a body so that he can interact with us on our level. And you know what we as humanity, what we do? We murder God. If that's not evidence of a broken world, I don't know what would be. We don't receive him and love him. We put him up on a cross to have him tortured and executed.
Now, if that's not an expression also of our shame. So I don't want you to think, Jesus is called a man of sorrows. We're told in Hebrews, he was tempted in all points like we are. He had the full human experience. Being hungry, being tired, feeling lonely and isolated, being hated. So having said all that, I want to key in on now Matthew 26, because this records an experience that Jesus had in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus knows, thank you, Edwin. Jesus knows that he's going to be betrayed. Just everything about Jesus' death is like the worst possible way. Betrayal got added in there. Someone that was with him for 3 years is the one that sold him out. Think about how painful that would have been for Jesus. Now, let me ask you this question. Do you think it was challenging for Jesus to go to the cross? Or because he was God, it was really no problem? Hey, it's just, I'm God, so I'll just go to the cross, get up there. It's not an issue. I'll come back to life in 3 days. It's all good. Still felt pain. Was it a challenge for Jesus in his humanity to be obedient to the mission he was on? To get up on the cross and experience that excruciating pain and rejection, betrayal. Jesus on the cross cries out, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? Deep emotional anguish. So I want to say just right there in this message that if there's any pain or shame that you are experiencing, Jesus can relate. He's not so transcendent that he doesn't understand you. And we're gonna talk more about that. He understands your pain and your anguish, I would argue, even better than you do. I want you to see that Jesus is the God that you can relate to, because he totally relates to you. Now, having said all that, we asked him questions. Let's try to answer those questions by looking at Matthew 26. We'll pick up in verse 36, just read a few verses and see what we can learn. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane. And he said, sit here while I go over there to pray. Sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, Peter, James, and John. James and John. And he became anguished and distressed. Anguished and distressed. Now, why do you think he's anguished and distressed? He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. So it's not just like the physical pain that is weighing on him, it's the emotional pain too. Isn't that what's being described? Stay here and keep watch with me. Keep watch with me. He went on a little, we'll come back to that. He went on a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. I think Jesus understood that it was not possible for the cup of suffering, the cross, to be taken away. But yet here's recorded, Jesus makes this request while still in complete obedience to the will of his Father. But it's not like he sinned in that moment by saying, hey, if it's possible. Like he's communing and communicating through prayer to his Father in a way that he's pouring out his soul. If it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Now, we know that Jesus in his deity has the exact same will as the Father. Jesus in his humanity is feeling the emotional anguish in a very real way, not a fake way, pseudo way, a very real way. Then he returned to his disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? power. Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Is Jesus just referring to the disciples in that? Or is it possible in his humanity, that's what he's experiencing? That his spirit is willing to obey the Father, but his flesh, his body is weak, knowing he's already feeling the great distress. He's already feeling the great anguish, and he knows there's more to come. And he says to his three closest disciples, keep watch with me. Keep watch, the idea of help me pray, but also I get the sense that, hey, look, Judas has already left the Lord's Supper, and Jesus already knows he's gone out to betray him. He knows that the temple guards are coming to take him away. And he wants this last moment to be able to pray to his Father, to get prepared to go through with it. So it's almost like part of what's happening here is, hey, Peter, James, John, keep a lookout for me. They can't take me away until I have this time with my dad. And so Jesus is teaching them that the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak, because in his humanity, that's what he's also experiencing. Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, my Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. You know what Jesus is doing here partly? Is teaching us how to pray. It's not all sanctimonious prayer. He's keeping it so real with his Father, like his soul is laid bare to him, like he's able to. And you ever had those times of prayer? Because here we begin to see the necessity of prayer. Because what happens if you don't have times of prayer like this, where you lay your soul bare and all the anguish and all the distress? You know what you do? We carry it with us. And you don't think that affects your mood, your personality, and the people around you, your family, those closest to you, versus the freedom of getting up from a time of prayer like this, where you've poured out your heart and you feel that freedom because you know what? Through this moment of prayer, have left it in God's hands. Like, I'm going to do my part and to be obedient, like Jesus is expressing his desire to be obedient to the Father, but I'm going to do my part. I'm going to do what I can, but God, you're going to have to do what I can't. And like I don't have to worry. Like the brain says, I worry, ruminate, worry. I mean, it's like, I don't have to. That's in God's hand. I already gave that to God. It's his. He's involved. Now, do we believe he's involved? I want to talk about that in just a moment as well. Gordon, by the way, welcome. So great to see you. Great to have you back. Can't wait to talk to you after all this time. When he returned to them again, he found them praying and keeping watch, right? He found them sleeping. Again, this is again happening again. For they couldn't keep their eyes open. You know, people will let you down. It's great to have people around you, but what I understand is the people I love the most are going to let me down at points. And guess what? I'm going to let them down too. Now, I want to be expression of God's steadfast love to people around me, but I know I'm going to fail at points. And that's really, ultimately, I want to get them to God, because he's the one that's never going to leave them or forsake them, never going to let them down. He's steadfast. I want to be an expression of that. But I'm going to fail at points like the disciples failed Jesus here. So he went to pray a third time. You notice Jesus doesn't wake him up saying, what's the matter? He just, okay, you know what? So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, go ahead and sleep. Have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here. Jesus at the beginning of that is feeling anguish and great distress, but I get the sense from the end of that he's prepared now. He's had his time with his dad. He's been able to pour out his heart. And the other thing I'll just say as kind of a side note is when we're carrying great emotional anguish and distress with us, do you know that we're not really good decision makers? Because we're in what we call the emotional brain, and we're not into the rational brain, which is good at critical thinking. We don't make great decisions. And so it's almost like in order to get to the problem-solving part, the critical thinking part, rational thinking part, where we make good decisions, first our soul has to be unburdened. We have to unload that. Now, imagine what would happen if you have been carrying a burden for such a long time that it's become part of your identity. From your perspective, it's become part of your personality, and it becomes how you experience the world. Because it's been so long, here's where we say that time does not heal all wounds. Welcome, Crystal. Good to see you. Does God care about you? He delights in his creation. And just to remind us of this, I want to turn to Psalm 139, verse 17. Now, Psalm 139 usually is what the chapter that we use to prove or communicate that God is omnipresent. Where can I go from your presence? So if I ascend to heavens, you're there. If I go down to the depths, you're there. But then you keep reading, it says, how precious, verse 17, how precious are your thoughts about me, O God? They cannot be numbered. David says, how precious are your thoughts about me, O God? They cannot be numbered. David is communicating, he understands that God loves him and spends time thinking about him. Now, when I say spends time thinking about him, that's an anthropomorphism, right? Because God is God. He dwells outside of space-time. And nevertheless, that's true. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God? They cannot be numbered. Do you believe that? Because I want to, if I'm saying that you need to spend time to pour out your soul to God, that's what prayer, a big part of what prayer is to be. I want to prove that even more. But if you think he's punishing you and hates you, trying to get you back, are you going to go to him? Further, if you see God the Father through the lens of your biological father, and your biological father wasn't the best example, or say he was a great provider, a great protector, but it was never any what? Thank you. Exactly. If there was he didn't really ever share his emotion with you. He was just like stoic. And it's really easy for us to project that experience onto God the Father and think that's how God the Father is as well. That's what's really important to get in his word to find out how he really is. So, Jesus gives us an example, and if it's important for Jesus, being God in his humanity, to pour out his soul in deep emotional anguish and distress to his Father, do you not think it's also important for us? What is the alternative? And you think about, say, a parent or set of parents who, in their family, with their children, don't have this practice instantiated, where they don't have the idea of on a regular basis we come together and we pour out our souls before God, and we get up from that prayer time and just feel a peace because we've placed it in God's hands. And what if it's the norm for a family just to carry that burden and that stress? And don't you think they would end up taking it out on each other? Because in families we're comfortable with each other and we show our true colors, right? I've been married a long time. So, and then when children, as the older they get, the more, it's like when I observe children, the older they get, the more they realize, the more they're awakening into the awareness that the world is broken and it is not as it should be. And they're taking the hits. And as I think I mentioned last week or the week before, at that point, is they're waking up into this awareness of their own consciousness with reference to their own experience. It's almost like they're brought to a crossroads where they get to choose whether they're the problem or the world's the problem. Now, which would be a better option, an easier option for them to assimilate for most personality types in children? Usually it's I'm the problem. Because the idea of the world's the problem, which include the caretakers, which would include, parents and those closest to me, if they're like, that's too much for me to bear. I would rather just take it on myself. Now I'm going to come back to that idea because that's where I'm at. That's what's much easier for me to do. So I want to read through just a little bit of Psalms, because the book of Psalms is teaching us how to do this. In large part, it's teaching us how to pray. And there are Psalms that record certain things that we might have a tendency to think, oh, that's not right. That's sin. You're sinning. You're like all those Psalms we've talked about before where they don't end up getting resolved. Like Psalm 88 ends with, darkness is my only friend, period, the end. And that was written by the third wisest man, Ethan the Ezraite, or Hemanite, one of the two. But you know what the very next Psalm 89 does? Ethan's right back to praising God throughout the whole Psalm. And it's a messianic Psalm also. I think as we said before, what the psalmists are communicating to us is it's okay to pour out your soul. Through some of those Psalms, God is in some sense being blamed or called to give an account for why have you abandoned me? We might think it's not okay to talk to God like that. But we have to remember he understands where we're at, where we're coming from. I believe God would rather have us talk to him and be that candid with him than allow us to carry that by ourselves. So I got to keep moving, but Psalm 142. And we're going to read through these just briefly. I want you to think about what it means to pray, how to communicate with God. Psalm 142, I cry out to the Lord. I plead for the Lord's mercy. I pour out my complaints before him and tell him all my troubles. When I'm overwhelmed, you alone know the way I should turn. Wherever I go, my enemies have set traps for me. I look for someone to come and help me, but no one gives me a passing thought. No one will help me. No one cares a bit what happens to me. Then I pray to you. Ever felt like that way? My mom, when I was feeling this way as a child, my mom would say, oh, Timothy, you're having a pity party. Right? I've shared this with you. What? Ouch. Keep it down, Rebecca. Keep it down. Then I pray to you, O Lord, I say, you are my place of refuge. You are all I really want in life. Hear my cry, for I am very low. Rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison so I can thank you. The godly will crowd around me, for you are good to me. I love how part of the rescue plan is the community of the godly coming around him to support him. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Listen to my plea. Answer me because you are faithful and righteous. Don't put your servant on trial, for no one is innocent before you. My enemy has chased me. He has knocked me to the ground and forces me to live in darkness like those in the grave. I am losing all hope. I am paralyzed with fear. I remember the days of old. I ponder all your great works and think about what you've done. I lift my hands to you in prayer. I thirst for you as parched land thirsts for rain. Come quickly, Lord, and answer me. Check this out. For my depression deepens. My depression deepens. Don't turn away from me or I will die. Let me hear of your unfailing love each morning, for I am trusting you. Show me where to walk, for I give myself to you. Rescue me from my enemies, Lord. I run to you to hide me. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. May your gracious spirit lead me forward on a firm footing for the glory of your name, O Lord. Preserve my life because of your faithfulness. Bring me out of this distress. In your unfailing love, silence all my enemies and destroy all my foes, for I am your servant. Long story short, the psalmist's soul is being poured out, and he's teaching us how to pray. Now, some of us, I feel like the way I would explain it is, for some of us, we don't have a lot of experience doing this. It may feel uncomfortable, unnatural, and so the way I like to look at it is God gives us a gospel community around us to do this for us, to get us started, so that we can learn what it looks like to pour out our souls to another person in the room. And what we have called the empathetic witness, the power of the empathetic witness. Jesus in his humanity is the ultimate empathetic witness. But it's like God gives us training wheels with each other. I want to talk about the power of that. And we mentioned it briefly before. So I'll turn to a well-known verse, Galatians 6. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. It says gently and humbly help that person. It doesn't say judgment, criticism, harsh tone. It doesn't say use guilt and shame, toxic shame. It doesn't say to use fear as a motivator, toxic fear as a motivator. But notice what it says in the next verse, verse 2. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. Share each other's burdens. What the psalmist has been doing up to this point is sharing his burden with God. And some of us need to start off with just sharing it with each other. Something I want to add to that. That's why I say to people, the only thing I really care about for you is that God's blessing is on your life. I want you to have open channels of communication with him. I don't want you to have any unresolved issues with him. Because if you cut yourself off from God, you certainly don't want him as your enemy. The Bible talks about people who have not had their sins forgiven, have not trusted in Jesus, ultimately they're enemies of God. That's a scary place to be in. But it's totally unnecessary because he paid the penalty for all our sin on the cross. And all we have to do is ask him for that forgiveness. But something I want to add to that is what we read in Matthew 5:23. You've heard me say it before. Matthew 5:23 says, so if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. God wants a community to be tight-knit and strong. Man. So if someone has something against you, God wants you to get it right. But Mark 11:25, it's the other side of the coin. But when you are praying, first forgive anyone you're holding a grudge against, so that your Father in heaven will forgive your sins too. So what we take those two verses together. If you have a grudge against someone, or someone has a grudge against you, go and get that thing right. You know what that's going to require? Confrontation. How many of us hate confrontation? How many of us hate the feeling how uncomfortable is it? Can we get here's a spiritual discipline we all have to get used to if we're going to grow. You ready? I love this, going back to that section of Psalm 141, verse 5. The psalmist says, let the godly strike me. Let the godly strike me. Are you willing to let godly people around you strike you? Does that mean everybody line up and I'm just going to punch you all in the face right here? Like, just to obey this verse? Is that what it means? And some of you would like that. You say, thank you, may I have another? I'll turn the other cheek. Hit me again, I deserve it. I've been so bad. And I might be inclined to feel that same way. What? Yeah, oh, wow. Wow, that's wow. What high school did you go to? No, just kidding. That's deadly. You know that, right? Let the godly strike me. It will be a kindness. It will be a kindness. If they correct me, it is a soothing medicine. Don't let me refuse it. Some of us, in certain situations and contexts, including myself, we put up walls saying, okay, we can talk about all these things, but don't talk to me about this thing. And part of what the Lord is doing in answer to our prayer is that he sends us people to speak into our life. And sometimes they want to speak into your life because they want to bless you like medicine. And we say, nope. And we let it be known through nonverbal cues or some other way that, hey, no, off limits. And what's the result of that? We end up carrying this burden by ourselves. Imagine if we had let the godly strike us, resulting in it being medicine to us. It could have saved us a lesson that took us the next 3 to 5 years to learn. Imagine that. Now, I have to wrap this up. Well, I'm doing pretty good though, but I'm still going to wrap it up. Here's a question for you. I love this question. I'm going to try to make it relevant and show you why I'm asking it. But here's my question for each of us. Are you accessing the parts of your heart that carry burden? It's like, no. No. We don't talk about that. That's off limits. So, are you accessing the parts of your heart that carry burden? So why? So I can feel pain again? So I can, revisit the trauma so I can be re-traumatized? Like, why would I do that? It seems completely counterintuitive. But are you accessing the parts of your heart that carry burden so you can share that burden with others? Now, so that you can share that burden with others. Didn't Galatians 6:2 command us, fulfilling the law of Christ, that we are to posture ourselves so that we are willing to bear that burden with other people? Does Jesus want you to bear it by yourself? So I alluded to this just briefly last week, and I got to come back to it because it's a really important principle. So I want to read to you this quote. And the most important part is towards the end, but hear this, because if you don't, I want you to understand what this is saying, okay? One of evil's primary methodologies of accessing people's hearts and minds is through the implementation of shame. Evil accesses our what? Our hearts and minds through the implementation of shame. This is why God comes to us in such a vulnerable way. He sees the whole of us. God coming to us is the model by which we then go to others. Jesus came to us in a very vulnerable way. And I said last week, the ultimate expression of that vulnerability is God is naked in his humanity on a cross. So that becomes the model by which we go to others. This is why we want to be in communities in which we're able to be vulnerable. Because one of the antidotes to shame is vulnerability. And again, I want to talk to you about this in my own life. It is the activity of being fully true. Confession, and it's not just a confession of, I did something wrong, will you forgive me? I don't want you to just think of confession that way. More broadly, confession is really being real with someone, how you really feel about things. The way the psalmist was before God, the way that Jesus was to the Father in the garden. Confession is my embodied action, that's important, of revealing the whole truth of who we are in the presence of someone else. As a pastor, I can relate to that part because I feel like there's certain things I cannot share because it will damage people. It will hurt them. It will be too much of a burden for them to bear. I think about what Jesus said to his disciples, there are many things I want to tell you, but you cannot bear them yet. And I know it's not just me because I'm a pastor. It's all of us because there are certain things we feel like if we really share those with other people, they couldn't handle it. It'd be too much for them. They wouldn't understand. But rather, I'm going to repeat that part. Confession is my embodied action of revealing the whole truth of who we are in the presence of someone else. When we express our deepest and darkest secrets to someone and they still choose to love us after, that dismantles shame. Can I say that again? And I want to, again, talk to my experience. So first I want to go back to that question. Are you accessing parts of your heart that carry burden so you can share that burden with others? Because when we express our deepest and darkest secrets to someone and they still choose to love us after, that dismantles shame. So one thing that we can conclude right there is that prayer to God, where you're real with him, not the holy sanctimonious thing, but you're real with him, you can step up from that prayer having shame dismantled in your life. It's powerful. And maybe your training wheels is to start to do this with someone else. So in my life, my wife has been amazing at this for me. Now, I won't say she's been amazing every single time, but there are times where she has been my empathetic witness, and here's my experience. I thought, she said, let's talk, and I immediately was like, no, we need to communicate. And my knee-jerk response in my flesh is, about what? There's nothing to talk about. Like, we've talked about everything. We were talking for a whole 2 minutes. And then I realized it's not going to go away, and she'll just plop herself down in my life right in front of me, like on my lap while I'm trying to write something. And I realized there's no way to really get her out of the room without violence. So I say to myself, I'm just going to wait it out. And I'll just try to keep my mouth shut and just try to give short answers, and that'll just speed this whole process up. But then I'm being transparent with you guys, but like what I found is she'll probe a little bit, and there has been times where it's been a 1 and 2 hours where I'm just unloading on her about how I really feel about things. Things that for a lot of people, if they heard me say, would be super scary. And I didn't. And see, here's how it's happening. During that process, I'm sharing things about, say, our marriage and about life and about our situation and context, and even way back in the past, things that have happened to me in my past, things that happened to my parents in the past, maybe even things that happened to our whole family tree in the past. And I'm actually, some part of my experience is I'm experiencing this surprise that all this is coming up out of me. And sometimes it just starts to escalate into this crescendo. But then here's what I notice. When it's all over, said and done, I walk away from that lighter. I start to have a sense of humor again. I start to tell jokes again. And what I realized in those moments is that I needed to unload something, and I was burying something. And my wife already knew it because I would be taking it out on her, misplaced aggression, emotional leakage. And you know what my wife does for me in those moments? A lot of the things I'll say in a time like that she could take very much as an offense against her. And what would happen? It would escalate. But when at her best and most spirit-filled, she'll let me communicate these things. She won't take it personally. She'll just listen through the power of an empathetic witness. And I know through this whole time, the reason why I keep talking is because she's somehow communicated to me in that moment that she loves me still. And what I feel like I'm doing in that moment is I'm showing her the worst parts of me. And I already know I'm saying things that are not godly at points. They're not spirit-filled. I know they're not right. I don't need her to nitpick that to death. But like I'm able to pour out to her. And I know it can be very hard for her because she gets like, wait, are you a Christian? Like, did your whole value system change? And then she needs some assurance that no, here's what's going. But I tell you, it's shame in that moment, in those moments like that, it's been dismantled in large part. And she is bearing my burden with me. You can do that. You have to have people in your life that can do that. Sometimes there might be a person, but like it would be too much for them. You need to have people that are strong enough to be able to handle that. Because in the end of it all, you know what I'm ready for? Counsel. But it's like I'm not ready to hear counsel to be corrected on the front end. It's on the back end. And most of the time, I already know what the right thing to do is. And it seems way easier to embrace that when my soul has been unburdened. Now, can I talk to you in a brief moment at the end, like what's the alternative to this process? I talked about pouring out your heart to God, pouring out your heart to godly people around you. I got to say one more thing about that part. I want you to understand this part of the principle. There's going to be times in our life where we sin against each other, correct? And the temptation for us is, okay, I have to get it right. I'm a Christian. And especially as husbands, what we want to do is say, I'm sorry, and that be the end of it. Right? And then if that doesn't solve it in that, 0.5, half of a second, we're like, what's the matter with you? I said I was sorry. But what has happened is sometimes in a marriage even, we can sin against our spouse in a way that is damaging, might be a good word. It's probably a better one. And the idea of that, we've sinned in such a way where the soul, we put this burden on the soul, and she's carrying it. And if I just simply want to say sorry and move on, why aren't you over it yet? The way I would describe it pejoratively is to say, okay, she just wants to get her pound of flesh. But what I realize is if I'll let her pour out the soul and I'll just take it, after all, I did earn it. If I'll just take it, then what I experience is that her soul can be unburdened and trust can be rebuilt. And in the end, we end up being closer together. And I love her enough to take those hits that I actually earned. And I get to demonstrate in a much more powerful and profound way that I actually love her because I'll take all those hits that I earned. And through me taking it, she sees, yes, Timothy, my husband, is demonstrating that he does in fact love me. He does actually care about me. He cares about this burden that I'm bearing. What's the alternative? That we do each other, we hurt each other, and then if we won't go to each other and get it right, we're like, you can imagine the tension that would fill a community of any sort, like a family or a church or whatever, because everybody's carrying around these burdens and there's no communication to happen. And that's why I say, like, the dining room table is the most important piece of furniture in the home, is because that's when a family comes together and is able to unburden their souls with each other and find love and support. And there's power in that empathetic witness. Now, I'm describing all that, but I want to now tell you, we may have misunderstood. And I want to tell you briefly, in a few minutes I have remaining, what the alternative is to all that. And this is kind of the principle I wanted to add to the table before we move on to other things throughout this year. Blame. There's a lot of things we could say, but I wanted to give you one strategy or one alternative to what we've been talking about unburdening your soul, which is a healthy, good process that your soul needs. But the alternative to that is, hey, we blame people. Now, have you noticed that when you blame someone or someone blames you, have you noticed how much you just feel a closeness and intimacy with that person? And it just kind of really brings you together and you just bond like never before. Has that been your experience with blame? No, right? It brings division. It destroys communities. But what if you say, well, what if someone actually is to blame? Have you also noticed that you can't change another person? You can't force them to change? And we can deceive ourselves thinking, I'll make this person change. They're going to be my project. I'm going to change their personality. How's that going for you? We, especially to the men around here, part of our culture is to say the definition of masculinity is that men take responsibility for themselves and others. Amen. That's what a hero does. Now, here's the thing though. I want to add a little bit of nuance to that. We can tell ourselves that we're being men and masculine and taking responsibility when in fact we're blaming ourselves and beating ourselves up. I would argue that blaming others, blaming God, blaming the system, and then finally blaming yourself is not helpful. I've asked this many times, have you ever been in a work environment where the manager, supervisor, boss, owner, whoever used blame or shame to motivate? You better get your act together or you're going to get fired. Does that just encourage you to do your ultimate best?
Oh, yes.
And it's like, it seems so obvious, but they haven't figured that out. And companies that use those methods, blame, shame, guilt, toxic versions, they have high attrition, do they not? Because inside, the person's not motivated. They're saying, I'm going to get out of here, find another job. I might even quit before I have another job as soon as I can. They hate coming to work. They associate work not with the joy from creativity and creative expression. They associate it with pain. That which is ugly. So the idea of what I'm asking us to do in this pouring out of our burden is taking responsibility for ourselves. Because there are ways that our soul, in bearing this burden, can try to deal with it in ways that are unhealthy, that are destructive to the community, that pull people apart. And there are ways to deal with it that unburden our souls in a healthy way that brings people together. We have to be able to notice the difference. So there's three categories, and I'm going to redefine these terms because sometimes I've used these terms in a positive way. And I'm going to use all three terms in a negative way for purposes of teaching this morning. Ready? The three terms I want to use are victims, villains, and heroes. Now, heroes we've used in a positive sense because we always say Jesus is the ultimate hero. But just for this morning, I want to use heroes in a negative sense. And you'll see why. Because I think our tendency, our knee-jerk response for a lot of us in situations to dealing with the shame, dealing with the burden that our soul is bearing, we have a tendency to either play the victim, play the villain, or play the hero. I want you to think about which one you are. incline towards. Victims. The idea of this isn't fair and I end up just whining and complaining about it. I don't like my situation, I don't like my life, I don't like what this person does, but in response to that, instead of unburdening my soul, I just complain and I whine about it. Or my dad who would say gripe about it. Victims believe that they have to play the victim in order to receive love. As in, poor me. Like I said about myself growing up as a pity party. You should feel sorry for me. Like, imagine, there's so many different contexts, but imagine in the context of kids growing up and they didn't get much of attention, but they learned in order to get attention, what do kids do? They act out to get attention because some attention is better than none. But what if a kid learned, wow, in order to get attention in my home, I have to play the victim. Like, I have to get hurt and I scrape my knee and no one even notices. But if I act all dramatic and I'm crying, poor me, then my mom will actually notice and give me a Band-Aid and I'll get some empathy and some love. And I love that when she does that and she, cuddles me and makes me feel like And so imagine that's what you had to do. And then you take that out into your adult life and you're like, okay, in order for anybody to care about me, to notice me, I have to be so dramatic about everything. And so people will feel sorry for me. Instead of saying, hey, you know what? Like I said a few weeks ago, like, hey, I'm just feeling disconnected. Hey, you know what? I'm feeling lonely right now. I could really use some attention. Like just being honest with each other, like what our needs are. Instead of having to manipulate someone into meeting our need. Can we just get good at being transparent with each other? Second one, villains. Now, villains in this case, just briefly for sake of time, villains, all we do is we blame others. We just blame the system, we blame God. Like Proverbs 19:3 says, people make a mess of their own lives and then are angry at the Lord. Now, what the problem with this is, it's not constructive because you can spend decades, a lifetime perhaps, in situations where you've just been blaming, complaining, or playing the victim, but those things will never cause growth in your life. The third one, for sake of time, is people who always want to play the hero. I want to step in and save the day. What's the problem with that? Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that what Jesus did for us? Stepped in and saved the day? Heroes keep others from taking responsibility. So their lives, which keeps them from growing, and it leads to burnout in their own lives. Pastors can be very good at this. We're the heroes, we step in and save the day for everybody. Meanwhile, our own family's falling apart and we're burnt out, but we can't ever share that because too spiritual for that, too strong for that. They try to save the day, but it brings disaster down the road. All of this because they really just hate, here's what it is, they really just hate the discomfort that comes from conflict and confrontation. Instead of actually dealing with the issue, I just want to take care of the issue, solve it, problem solved, moving on. But no one learned or grew, or no souls were unburdened, and so it just sets us up for more problems down the road. All because I don't like to feel uncomfortable when there's conflict, so make the conflict go away. Just make it go away. Like, I'm starting to feel tension in the room. Oh, I hate that. Let me step in and just make that all. But there's no real interaction. Heroes can become so detached from their feelings and emotions that they forget how to feel. It's so stuffed down inside of them. That's another scenario. The idea of a child is a surrogate parent growing up and he has to carry the emotional burden of their parent. And so all that matters in the home is their parents' feelings, their parents' emotions, so they stop thinking about the fact that they have their own. And they've learned, there's tension in the house. Mom's upset or dad's upset. We got to rush to solve that. What's the matter? So there's peace in the house. And then they stop being able to have emotion or care themselves. And here's the one that trips me up, if I were to be honest with you. Self-blame is equally as toxic as blaming others or circumstances and is not taking responsibility. You say, then what is? So self-blame can be toxic. I'm inclined to, it's so much easier for me to blame myself and tell myself I'm just taking responsibility, and that's a good thing, But when in fact I'm just having an extended pity party, beating myself up, what's a better alternative? If I'm going to take responsibility for the situation for real, because right now is me heaping a bunch of guilt and shame on myself going to change the situation? Rather, for all those things, what we have to do is go from placing blame to thinking, okay, the situation is what it is. How can I learn from it so I can grow so we can actually make the situation better? That's taking responsibility. It requires us to be learners. Now, if we're just stuffing things down or blaming all our problems on someone else or just playing the victim, poor me, we get so used to saying poor me that the situation is not changing. So here's what I'm saying in conclusion. Jesus is the model for us in the Garden of Gethsemane, that he felt great anguish and distress. He had to pour out his soul to the Father in preparation to be obedient to the Father and going to death on the cross. If it's important for God and his humanity to do so, it's going to be important for us. We need to be able to be willing to sit down with people long enough so that they can do this. Sometimes people are so, they've lost the ability to feel because they've been in an environment so long where they haven't been allowed to feel. Your emotions don't count. My emotions count, yours don't count. And they've stuffed it down for so long, it's like you almost got to try to get them to get angry again. To turn that part of the brain and their soul on. It's like, and so it can finally flush out. Because you see they're carrying it and they're just like stiff and stoic. It's like, okay, no, you can tell me. How do you feel about that? What was it like? Like to get them to wake back up. So all these things we're talking about are on the front end. All the counsel, because if we don't go through this process with ourselves and others around us, what our Christianity, as far as helping people becomes, is take 2 verses and call me in the morning. So we give them 2 Bible references and walk away, and as if that's going to solve all their problems. I told them the truth. And the Bible references could be completely relevant, but their soul needs to be unburdened. The Bible tells us to bear one another's burdens. And if you don't have another person, you have God. That's the ultimate person we need to be able to, because I'm going to fail at doing this for my wife. She's going to fail at doing this for me sometimes. Now, it's amazing when we get it right. It's amazing. It leads to romance, things like this. We've talked about this in the past. Here's my challenge for the week. Here's my challenge for the week. I want you to practice some self-awareness and see where your tendency is to blame others, which would include God and the system, blame yourself in a beat yourself up way, or play the victim, or play the hero because really you're feeling uncomfortable about the tension in the room. See if you catch yourself doing that. And then think about and let that be a check engine light, an indicator, a red flag saying, hey, wow, my soul's being burdened. I need to unburden it. No one's around. I have prayer. I need to spend some time in prayer. It's a tragedy when people carry burdens that they have, things that cause them deep pain with them for decade after decade after decade. And this is how the whole process of systemic abuse happens, because kids are abused and they carry this burden, but they never set the burden or learn to set the burden down. So what do they end up doing? Taking it out on the next generation. And the next generation does it for the next generation. And that just becomes the culture of that family tree. It's a shame culture instead of a grace culture. So if Jesus needs it, we need it too. The power of an empathetic witness that dismantles shame. Sharing our burden with other people. People, they like me, but I don't know if they love me enough to hear all my baggage. Notice we always say, oh, we all have baggage. We need to learn to set that baggage down. It's heavy. Set it down. That's what was happening at the cross. Jesus was just saying, give me your baggage. I can bear it. Give it to me. It's not like God's going to offend you. Say, don't pray to me anymore. Like I'm offline. No, your prayers will not be accepted anymore. You were just too real with me last time. I've learned in my life, I guess this last thing and I'll be done. I've learned in my life things that could upset me for 2 weeks maybe. My wife would say longer, 2 months. I realize I can work through those things if I was really diligent in 20 minutes instead of 2 weeks or 2 months. That's possible. That possibility exists, but I can't doing it by just trying to ignore it. I have to go through this process we're talking about. Do you see the necessity of prayer in the Christian life? Let's be there for one another. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you don't get so easily offended with us, that you cut us off and, unadopt us out of the family. Like that was a problem child that I adopted. Like get them out of here. Like they just pray too much. Lord, thank you that you delight in showing us your unfailing love. Lord, thank you that you are so real with us in the Gospels, showing us your vulnerability. You weren't too important to share your own struggles with us, and they're recorded for us. But Lord, help us to learn what it means to bear one another's burdens. Help us to learn what it means to unburden our souls in prayer and through the godly community around us. Lord, as parents, help us to teach this to our children and be aware enough so that we can give them space to unburden their souls. And Lord, to direct their problems they even experience now at such a young age to you in prayer. All these opportunities we have, Lord, to turn curses into blessings. Lord, help us to see the situations around us for what they really are so we can respond appropriately. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for your attention and patience. I think